Looking back now, I can see exactly when everything started to fall apart. Though honestly, I still think I was just trying to make the best of a bad situation. Brandon and I had been married for 5 years, and I'd spent every single one of those years trying to help him become the man I knew he could be. When we first met, everyone warned me he was commitment phobic, that he'd never settle down, but I saw his potential. I knew if I just gave him enough love and support, he'd transform into someone worthy of the life I wanted to build. And it worked, at least at first. Brandon went from being this perpetual bachelor who couldn't even keep a houseplant alive to actually proposing, planning a wedding, talking about our future together. I was so proud of how I'd reformed him, how I'd taken this rough diamond and polished him into husband material. The best part was how grateful he was for everything I did. He'd constantly thank me for making him a better man and showing him what real love looks like. It was exactly the kind of devotion I deserved after putting in all that work. We spent years planning our dream bakery together. Brandon was incredibly supportive, working overtime to build up our savings account, researching business loans, even taking a weekend course on small business management just to help me succeed. He'd get so excited talking about our plans, sketching out floor layouts on napkins, brainstorming menu ideas while we watched cooking shows together. Looking at him during those moments, I felt this warm satisfaction knowing I'd created this version of him. The old Brandon never would have had this kind of focus or ambition. But somewhere along the way, I started to realize that maybe I'd been thinking too small. Brandon was comfortable with our modest little life, our suburban routine, our circle of friends who never seemed to want anything more than backyard barbecues and game nights. He'd gotten so settled into being grateful for what we had that he'd stopped pushing for what we could have. I found myself wondering if I'd actually done too good a job domesticating him. Where was the drive to build something bigger? The hunger for real success? That's when I met Alex at Griffin's birthday party. Alex was everything Brandon had become too comfortable to be. Ambitious, sophisticated, always talking about his next big opportunity. He worked in real estate development and had this way of seeing potential everywhere he looked. When I mentioned the bakery idea, his eyes lit up in a way that reminded me how it felt to dream big. We started talking more after that party, just as friends at first. Alex would text me articles about successful food entrepreneurs, or invite me to networking events where I could meet other business owners. It felt incredible to be around someone who understood my vision, who didn't think I should be satisfied with some tiny neighborhood shop when I could build a real brand. The conversations gradually became more personal. Alex would ask about my marriage, and I found myself explaining how Brandon had gotten so comfortable that he'd lost his edge. How I felt like I was dragging him towards success instead of having a partner who matched my energy. Alex listened in this intense way that made me feel truly seen for the first time in years. "You know what your problem is?" Alex said one afternoon when we were having coffee. "You're thinking like someone who's settling instead of someone who's winning. Brandon sounds like a nice guy, but nice guys finish last. You've got too much potential to waste it on someone who's already peaked." The way he said it made something click into place. I had been settling. I'd put so much energy into improving Brandon that I'd forgotten to ask whether he was actually capable of becoming what I needed. Maybe it was time to focus on what I deserved instead of what I could make work. Our friendship shifted after that conversation. Alex started suggesting we grab drinks instead of coffee, texting me late at night when Brandon was already asleep, making comments about how much more interesting I was than most married women he knew. The attention was intoxicating. Here was someone who saw me as exciting and dynamic instead of just a supportive wife. When we finally kissed, it felt like waking up from a long, boring dream. Alex was passionate in a way Brandon had never been, even in our early days. He made me feel desirable and powerful and alive. More importantly, he understood my ambitions in a way Brandon never could. "You're playing this all wrong," Alex told me a few weeks into our relationship. "You're thinking about leaving Brandon before you get what you're owed. 5 years of marriage, all that money you two saved for the bakery. You earned that. Don't let him keep it just because you've outgrown him. He was right, of course. I had earned that money through years of being the perfect supportive wife. The bakery fund represented my dreams just as much as Brandon's financial contributions. Maybe more, since I was the one with the actual vision and talent. Why should I have to start over from nothing just because I'd finally found someone who appreciated my worth? So we developed a plan. I'd be patient, play the long game, get the business established, or at least secure my claim to the savings, then transition into the life I actually wanted. It wasn't about being cruel to Brandon, it was about finally being fair to myself. The hardest part was maintaining the facade at home. Brandon was so trusting, so completely oblivious to what was happening right under his nose. He'd ask about my late nights, and I'd tell him I was networking for the bakery. He'd notice me being distant, and I'd claim I was stressed about business planning. The man never questioned a single explanation I gave him. I started being more careful about my phone, changing the passcode, and removing Brandon's fingerprint access. When he asked about it, I told him I needed more privacy while dealing with potential investors and business contacts. He actually apologized for being nosy and promised to respect my boundaries better. The guilt in his voice was almost too much. Here he was blaming himself for my secrecy. There were moments when I'd feel bad about what I was doing, usually late at night when Brandon would reach for me in bed, or when he'd surprise me with little gestures like bringing me coffee exactly how I liked it. During those moments, I'd overcompensate with affection, trying to ease the guilt by being extra loving. But then I'd remember how limited our life together really was, how much bigger my world had become with Alex in it, and the guilt would fade. Alex kept encouraging me to think long-term. This isn't about hurting Brandon, he'd say. This is about you finally getting the life you deserve. He'll be fine. Guys like him always land on their feet. But you only get one shot at real happiness. The double life became almost addictive. During the day, I was responsible married Catherine, discussing business plans and grocery lists with Brandon. But in the evenings, I was the woman Alex saw. Sophisticated, ambitious, destined for something greater than suburban mediocrity. It felt like I was finally becoming who I was always meant to be. Brandon started getting suspicious around month 3. He'd make comments about how I seemed different, ask more pointed questions about where I'd been and who I was talking to. I could see him studying my face when I answered, looking for tells. It was almost insulting how long it had taken him to notice, honestly. If the situation were reversed, I would have figured it out weeks earlier. The night everything fell apart, I'd gotten careless. Alex and I had been texting about our timeline, discussing when I should start pushing Brandon toward either starting the bakery or dissolving our marriage. We'd mapped out different scenarios depending on how he reacted, including how to maximize what I'd get in a divorce settlement. I was exhausted from juggling everything and fell asleep without triple-checking that I'd deleted the conversation. I woke up to Brandon standing over our bed, holding my phone. His face completely white. The screen was lit up with months of messages between Alex and me, including the ones from that very night about playing the long game and getting what I deserved from the divorce. Catherine. His voice was so quiet I barely heard him. What the hell is this? My brain went into full damage control mode. Maybe I could still salvage this, convince him it wasn't what it looked like. Brandon, honey, I can explain. It's not what you think. He scrolled through more messages, and I watched his expression change from hurt to something harder. You've been planning this for months. The whole thing, leaving me, taking the bakery money, moving in with this Alex guy. Jesus Christ, Catherine, you even discussed the best timing to serve me divorce papers. It was all just a joke, I said, sitting up in bed and reaching for him. Nothing serious between us, I swear. Alex is just a friend who says dramatic things. You know how guys can be. Brandon stepped back like I'd tried to hit him. A joke? You've been having an affair and plotting to steal everything we've built together, and you're calling it a joke? I haven't stolen anything. That money is just as much mine as yours. I'm the one with the bakery skills, the vision, the actual talent. Your contribution was just funding. Anyone could have done that part. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I was panicking. Brandon's face went from hurt to something I'd never seen before. Real anger, the kind that meant he was done listening to explanations. "Get out," he said. "Brandon, please. We could fix this. I made a mistake, okay? I got confused about what I wanted, but we can work through this together. Isn't that what marriage means?" But he was already walking toward the bathroom, still holding my phone. I said, "Get out, Catherine. I don't want to look at you right now." I followed him, desperation making my voice higher. "You're overreacting. Yes, I got close to someone else, but I never actually left you. I'm still here, still trying to make this work. That has to count for something." He turned around so fast I almost ran into him. "You spent months planning how to destroy our marriage for money? And I'm overreacting? You want to know what counts, Catherine? What counts is that I loved you enough to never question where you were or who you were with, because I trusted you completely. What counts is that you looked me in the eye every single day and lied." I tried a different approach, letting tears come into my voice. "I know I messed up, but please don't throw away 5 years over this. I love you, Brandon. I chose you. I'm here with you right now, not with him." "You're here because your plan isn't finished yet," he said, and the certainty in his voice scared me. If you'd gotten the bakery money already, I'd have come home to divorce papers and an empty house. He wasn't wrong, but hearing it said out loud made it sound worse than it was. I wasn't thinking clearly. Alex got in my head with all these ideas about what I deserved, but deep down I knew what we had was real. Brandon laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "What we had was real for me, Catherine. For you, it was apparently just a placeholder until something better came along." I spent the rest of that night trying everything I could think of. Tears, apologies, promises to cut off contact with Alex, offers to go to counseling. Nothing worked. Brandon had shut down completely, answering me in monosyllables when he answered at all. By morning, I realized I wasn't going to be able to manipulate my way out of this one. Fine. If Brandon wanted to be stubborn and unforgiving, that was his choice. I tried to do this the easy way. Tried to spare his feelings by letting him think our marriage had just grown apart naturally. But if he was going to force the issue, then maybe it was time to stop pretending I wanted to save something that had been holding me back anyway. I packed a bag and left that morning, moving in with Alex temporarily while we figured out our next steps. It felt liberating. Actually, no more pretending to be satisfied with Brandon's small dreams. No more hiding my phone or sneaking around. Alex and I could finally be together openly and start building the life we'd planned. The divorce papers came faster than I'd expected. Brandon was citing infidelity and demanding an immediate dissolution of the marriage. When his lawyer called mine, I learned he'd somehow documented everything. Screenshots of our conversations, records of my whereabouts, even testimony from mutual friends who'd noticed my behavior changes. He'd been more observant than I'd given him credit for. I refused to sign immediately. This was all happening too fast, too emotionally. Brandon needed time to cool down and think rationally about what he was throwing away. We'd built a life together, accumulated assets, made plans. You don't just destroy all of that because of one mistake. When I called him to suggest we talk things out, he'd barely let me finish a sentence. "There's nothing to discuss, Catherine. Sign the papers." "You're being vindictive," I told him. "I know you're hurt, but this scorched earth approach isn't like you. We can find a way to split things fairly without involving lawyers and making everything ugly." "Fairly?" His voice was ice cold. "You mean like how you were planning to split things fairly when you took everything and left me with nothing? That was never the actual plan, Brandon. That was just Alex talking big, trying to make me feel powerful. I never would have actually gone through with something that extreme." But he'd already hung up. The legal process dragged on for months. I kept thinking Brandon would come to his senses, realize he was destroying both our lives over something that didn't have to be a big deal. Alex was getting impatient with how long everything was taking, especially since we were still living off his income while waiting for my settlement money. "How much longer is this going to take?" Alex would ask when I'd update him on the latest legal delays. "I thought you said Brandon was a pushover." "He's being advised by lawyers now," I'd explain. They're probably telling him to drag this out to punish me. But eventually, he'll have to be reasonable. The bakery fund is half mine no matter what. Except it wasn't, as I learned when the settlement was finally reached. Brandon's lawyer had somehow proven that his financial contributions far outweighed mine, that the business plan was developed using his research and connections, that I'd contributed primarily sweat equity, which wasn't quantifiable in the same way. I walked away with almost nothing, some personal belongings, half the value of my car, and a tiny fraction of our shared savings. I was in shock. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of supporting Brandon's dreams and helping him become a better man, and apparently that counted for nothing in court. The system was rigged against wives who'd invested emotionally instead of financially. It was completely unfair. When I got home and told Alex about the settlement, his reaction was not what I expected. "Wait, that's it," he said, looking up from his laptop. "What about the bakery money? What about the house equity?" The judge said Brandon could prove he'd contributed more to both. Something about documented evidence and financial records. My lawyer says we could appeal, but it would cost more than we'd likely recover. Alex closed his laptop and stared at me. "So you're telling me you blew up a 5-year marriage and got basically nothing to show for it?" "I got us," I said, moving closer to him on the couch. "I got the chance to be with someone who actually appreciates what I bring to a relationship. The money would have been nice, but it was never really about that." But Alex was already shaking his head. "Catherine, I thought you understood what this was. I thought you were someone who knew how to play the game and win. I don't do struggling. I don't do starting over from scratch with someone else's baggage." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this isn't what I signed up for. You were supposed to be this sophisticated woman who knew how to get what she wanted. Instead, you're basically a broke divorcee who got outsmarted by her boring ex-husband." The breakup happened that same night. Alex didn't even let me stay until I found another place. He wanted me gone immediately, like I was some kind of contamination he couldn't risk spreading. After everything we'd shared, all our plans for the future, he dumped me the second things got difficult. I ended up crashing with Kylie for a few weeks while I looked for an apartment I could actually afford. The whole situation was humiliating, but I kept telling myself it was temporary. Brandon would realize what he'd lost eventually. Alex would come to his senses and remember what we had together. I just needed to get through this rough patch. But weeks turned into months, and nothing improved. I found a depressing studio apartment in a complex that smelled like cigarettes and mildew. My friends started avoiding my calls because apparently I was too negative and always complaining about Brandon and Alex. Even Kylie, who'd been my closest friend since college, started making excuses when I suggested getting together. The worst part was hearing through mutual friends that Brandon was doing fine. Better than fine, actually. He'd used the settlement money to start some kind of consulting business that was apparently taking off. Griffin mentioned seeing him at a networking event, talking about expanding into new markets and hiring employees. The man I'd left because he lacked ambition was suddenly Mr. Entrepreneur. It was infuriating. Brandon had stolen my dreams, my money, my future, and somehow everyone was treating him like the victim. Meanwhile, I was struggling to pay rent and eating ramen noodles while he got to play successful businessman with assets that should have been half mine. One night, after a particularly bad day of job hunting and bill paying, I got drunk and called him. I was tired of everyone acting like I was the villain when I'd been the one who got screwed over by 2 manipulative men. "Brandon, it's me, Catherine." His voice was completely flat. "Why are you calling?" "I just wanted you to know that I'm doing great, really great. Alex and I are happier than ever, and I don't need your money or your pity or anything else from you." There was a long pause. "Okay. I mean it. Everyone keeps acting like I'm supposed to be sorry about what happened, but I'm not. I'm finally with someone who deserves me, someone who doesn't hold me back from my potential." If you say so. His complete lack of reaction was somehow worse than if he'd yelled at me. "Don't you have anything to say? Any curiosity about how I'm doing or what my life looks like now?" "Not really, no." That's exactly the problem with you, Brandon. No curiosity, no passion, no interest in anything beyond your little bubble. You never deserved someone like me anyway. You're probably right, he said, and then he hung up. I tried calling back, but he'd blocked my number. When I attempted to reach out through social media, I discovered he'd blocked me there too. It was like he'd erased me from his life completely. Which was pretty ironic, considering I was the one who'd outgrown our relationship. The isolation got worse as time went on. My friends were tired of hearing me explain why everyone else was wrong about the situation. My family lived 2 hours away and had never really understood my marriage to Brandon anyway. Dating was a nightmare because, apparently, being a recently divorced woman with no money and a lot of anger about your ex-husband isn't as attractive as you'd think. I kept expecting things to turn around, for Alex to realize he'd made a mistake and want me back, for Brandon to acknowledge that he'd been vindictive and unfair during the divorce, for anyone to recognize that I'd been wronged and deserved better than how I'd been treated. But here I am almost a year later, and none of that has happened. I'm still alone in my shitty apartment, still struggling financially, still watching from the sidelines while Brandon apparently builds some kind of successful business empire with money that should have been ours. Meanwhile, Alex is probably off finding some other married woman to manipulate into leaving her husband. The worst part is how everyone acts like this is all my fault, like I'm supposed to take responsibility for other people's choices, to be vindictive and selfish. I tried to handle things maturely, tried to find a solution that worked for everyone, but Brandon chose to be bitter and Alex chose to be a user. That's on them, not me. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Brandon had been more understanding about my friendship with Alex, if he'd been willing to work on our marriage instead of immediately jumping to divorce. We might have been able to save what we had, maybe even strengthen it. But he was too proud to forgive one mistake, too stubborn to see that people can change and grow. And Alex, I should have seen through his act earlier. All that talk about appreciating my potential and wanting to build something together, and he bailed the second I needed actual support. He was just as shallow and opportunistic as Brandon accused him of being. Maybe worse, because at least Brandon was honest about his limitations. I've tried reaching out to Brandon a few times through mutual friends, just to see if enough time has passed for us to have a civil conversation about how everything went down. But apparently he's made it clear he wants no contact whatsoever, which seems extreme for someone who's supposedly moved on and found success. It's like he wants me to stay punished forever for one period of confusion in our marriage, like he can't accept that people make mistakes when they're feeling trapped and underappreciated. I gave him 5 years of my life, helped him become someone better than he was when I found him, and this is how he repays that investment. So here I am, alone and broke, and apparently blocked from any chance of reconciliation or even closure. Everyone I used to care about has either abandoned me or chosen Brandon's side of the story. I'm supposed to just accept that I'm the villain in this narrative, that I deserve to lose everything because I briefly wanted something more than what I had. But I know the truth, even if nobody else wants to hear it. I know I was trying to make the best of a situation where I'd outgrown my marriage but still cared about my husband. I know Alex manipulated me just as much as everyone claims I manipulated Brandon. And I know that if Brandon had been half the man I thought I'd helped him become, we could have worked through this together, instead of him choosing the nuclear option. Maybe someday people will understand that there are two sides to every story, and that sometimes the person everyone blames is actually the one who got hurt the most. Maybe Brandon will eventually realize what he threw away when he chose revenge over forgiveness. Maybe I'll find someone who actually appreciates what I have to offer instead of punishing me for wanting more than I had. Or maybe this is just how it ends, with me alone, struggling, and somehow still being painted as the bad guy in my own life story. Either way, I'm done apologizing for refusing to settle for less than I deserved. Even if it cost me everything, at least I know I tried to reach for something better than the small, safe life Brandon was content to trap us both in forever.